Alright, so in this video we will see how can we define a relationship between two eloquent models. In our case this would be the book and the review models, and we will create a one-to-many relationship. So there will be one book that can have many reviews. So in this one-to-many relationship there is always a parent table, that's book in our case, and a child table, that's reviews. So each record in the parent table can be associated with multiple records in the child table, while on the other hand, each record in the child table can be associated with only one record in the parent table. So in our example, this means that the book can have many reviews, but one review can only be associated with one book. So the next step would be to connect those two models, and this is done by adding two things. The first thing that we need to add is the physical connection between those two tables. So we would have to add a column to the child table and a so-called foreign key. And next up, we will have to add some methods to the both book and review models to instruct Laravel that such connection between those two models exists. So let's go and modify this original migration. You could have created a new migration just for adding this relationship, though it's not necessary at this point as we are just learning. It's not released anywhere and we don't really have any data in those tables. So what we will do is we will just rerun all the migrations. So let's define this column that will reference the other table. You will do that by calling unsigned big integer book ID. Now there is a reason why we have to use this type, as you need to understand what a foreign key is in the first place. So this new column will be a foreign key. Now the foreign key is a column in a database table that refers to the primary key of another table. Now this would enforce the so-called referential integrity, which basically ensures that a record in one table has a corresponding record in another table, which basically means that if we put a value to this column, book ID, let's say that would be 5, we make sure that another row inside this books table exists and has the ID of 5. So this would be checked on the database level. Now, that's not a foreign key yet. That is just a column that needs to be of the type of the primary key of the other table, which you can check by going into this ID method and big increments. That's unsigned big integer by default. Alright, now to define a foreign key, you will call table foreign book ID. Next you will call another method called references. This will specify what column on the other table this foreign key references, and it references the ID on the other books table. So you also have to specify that using on books, and additionally we will add an onDelete handler specifying it to be cascade. Now what this does, what onDelete cascade does is it specifies that when the book would be deleted, so when a book record is deleted from the database, all related reviews should be removed too. So this will happen on the database level. Alright, so adding this foreign key will now make sure that that this column, book ID, needs to contain a valid ID from the book, which basically means that reviews can't exist on their own, they have to be associated with a specific book. But we are not gonna talk about how to associate those two records together. We will just see how can we define this relationship? So that was the first step. Now at this point we can run this migration inside the terminal. So this would be php artisan migrate refresh. We don't have to call the seed flag because we don't really seed anything. Alright, so it has run successfully. Now we have the updated database. Make sure that you have typed everything correctly. It's easy to make a mistake. The next step is to tell Laravel about that relationship by defining methods on both models. Now, before we jump into defining this relationship inside a model using methods, let me also mention that this syntax, defining this column and then adding a foreign key, in recent versions of Laravel, this has some shorthand syntax. It can be a little bit shorter if you use the defaults, because using foreign and those references and on methods, it gives you more flexibility. It's easier to reference a different column than the ID. But if you just want to create a simple relationship, then you can use a shorter syntax which will replace those two lines. So let me write a shorter syntax below. This would just be table foreign ID, which you can also call book ID. Then you'll add a constraint method call, and this will automatically set up the foreign key constraint. And then finally you can just call cascade on delete. And that would essentially do exactly the same thing as this line and this line combined. So if you will run migrate refresh command again, this should produce no changes in the database schema, because that's actually exactly the same. Alright, now let's move to the models and let's tell Laravel about this relationship. So this is done by adding methods to the models. So let's add first one to the book. So this would be a public function reviews. That would be the name of the relationship, and you need to return this has many and reference the model. That's a review class. Alright, so this has many method inside the book would define a one-to-many relationship between the book and the reviews. And it basically says that the book can have many reviews. Now on the other side, from the review side, let's add another method, public function, and call that book. And inside this one we will call this belongs to, and it belongs to a book. So this method inside the review model is used to define a so-called inverse side of the one-to-many relationship between a review and its book. And it also specifies that each review belongs to one book. Now, if we would take a closer look at those methods, you can see that there are more arguments than just the related model. That's, for example, a foreign key name, the local key name, and we don't specify them. We don't have to, because there are some default conventions in Laravel that, well, you actually should be aware of. And it's not an accident that we've created a column called book_ID, because that's the default convention in Laravel that for this relationship, one-to-many relationship between book and review, Laravel will look for a column inside review or reviews table that would use the singular name of the related model table, which is books. So the table for the book model is books. So singular would be book, and then it would append _ID to that column name. So If you want to specify a different foreign key as a second argument to this has many and belongs to methods, as they both accept this foreign key argument, the Laravel would use the default name as I have just described. Now, this is useful to know because sometimes you might have different conventions at your company, or you might be moving some older code with a pre-existing database to Laravel, so then you will have to configure that. Alright, so that's basically everything that we need to properly define this relationship in Laravel. So it took some time, we had to understand a couple of things, but this is how it is. Next up, we will see how we can associate those models together, how we can query the relationships, etc. And also we will see how we can load some related data and connect the related data inside a seeder.